Okay, we're live and recording. Hello and welcome to the last day of the Telltale's Blended Learning Festival. I'm here joined today with Dr. Axel Philippon, who will be presenting on teaching in online rooms, an introduction to WebEx with a focus on active participation. I'm very much looking forward to this session myself because I'm a very basic WebEx user. So I'm looking forward to finding out how to use WebEx to a greater degree. And we'll also find out about how to engage students in activities online. So with that, I will hand over to Dr. Axel Philippon. If you could please leave your mics off and then funnel any questions to the chat, and then I'll pass those across. Okay, thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Michael. So I work in the Department of Psychology, and I deal mainly with distance learning postgraduate course, and therefore WebEx is the main tool that I use to contact students, being it a one-to-one meeting, online tutorial, seminar, demonstration, and other type of online session. I also work for the Open University, and over there we use Adobe Connect. So it's another type of, it's a different software that we can use for deliver online synchronous session. And before that, I've used OU Live, which is an in-house, again, online synchronous software, Blackboard, Collaborate, Illuminate, and I probably forget some. And the reason why I say that is I personally think that it doesn't matter whether you are using WebEx, Zoom, Adobe Connect, or any other platform. What really matters is that you feel confident in using that tool. And for information, I have not received any form of training to use WebEx, so it's probably I have a bit more experience. However, I feel confident in using the platform because I've been trained to actually deliver online session using different platforms, and therefore I'm able to apply this knowledge into WebEx. And if I have to switch to another software such as Zoom, I'll be able to actually do that, because all software have the same feature to actually deliver online session and the same time of tools you can use to deliver activity and make the session more interactive. And I think the problem really in most cases is that we lacking the appropriate training to deliver effective session and using the wide range of tools that are available and necessary for deliver the aim of the session within a particular discipline. Therefore, I don't have a magical recipe in terms of what this is what you need to do. But hopefully, because obviously it really depends on the discipline and what you need to demonstrate or what sort of things you need to deliver in terms of knowledge. But you will have a better understanding of the tools that are available in virtual classroom, using WebEx as an example. But again, you can sort of take that knowledge and adapt it to another software. And use that to actually enhance participation. So it's really this sort of tools and your approach and your mindset when it comes to deliver online session. Okay, so as Michael sort of introduced, I'm going to deliver this session in two parts. First of all, I'm going to provide a very accessible tool of some of the features of WebEx and how to create online meetings, how to access your WebEx recording, how to do different things on the WebEx website, and I will have a look at the different type of tools that WebEx offer, as well as the additional tools that WebEx training can offer. So at the moment, you might actually not understand what I'm talking about, but it will become a little bit clearer. In the second part of the session, as Michael said, we will consider how we can make our session more interactive and looking more particularly at the use either of breakout room, polling, whiteboards, and how generally speaking we can engage students. And I put some ID together, but I'm really hoping we can actually pull our ID together so you can maybe add things to it. So, and if we have time, because I'm not sure about timing, we will discuss a fictional scenario about students being quiet. And obviously by doing all those sort of things in the second part, it will illustrate what I'm trying to say about using different tools and making the session a bit more interactive. Okay. So let's start with the WebEx feature, and I'm going to go back to some basic stuff, but I will not spend too much time. So don't worry. So there are 3 ways you can create an online session, or these are the 3 main ways. Either from your Google Calendar, and you're probably going to use that when you want to set up an online session with either colleagues or with a one-to-one session with a project student, or a student which you have a particular sort of relationship, as in personal tutoring and things like that. So in that case, you go on Google Calendar, you just create an event, you add a video conferencing, and you invite the person or the people you want to take part in the meeting. I'm not going to show it because it's not too much related to classroom and lecture to some degree. The second aspect, the second way you can create in a WebEx session is from the Moodle site. Again, I'm not going to show you how to do it. However, if you don't know how to do it, we have some wonderful resources from the Digital Learning Portsmouth YouTube channel, and I've put the link there, so when you'll be able to retrieve those slides, you'll be able to actually click on it. And the third way of actually creating an online WebEx session is to actually go on WebEx itself, so the main site. And the reason why I wanted to actually talk about this is because when we went into lockdown, I had many of my colleagues in the Department of Psychology that didn't even know that we had this My WebEx sort of web page that you can access, and you can do all sorts of things in terms of either creating. I'm just going to move to the next slide, actually. Oh, and something I wanted to mention before I move to the next slide is we have another sort of YouTube video from Digital Learning Portsmouth about how to join a WebEx meeting, which I put at the bottom because obviously if you're here, you know how to join. However, it might be useful for students and to actually show them how to actually join a WebEx meeting, so something to bear in mind in induction week or something to send with their welcome letter, something like that. Okay, so let me move on this. So My WebEx is this page that contains different things. So you can create a meeting, you can create an event and or training session. So these are the different type of session you can create. Recording a meeting, so you can manage your recording, or you can manage the meeting and sort of add a few features and remove some so you have some option in terms of setting. So I'm just going to show you My WebEx. I'm just trying to think which one I have. I think it's so I am on My WebEx, so you can see at the top uop.webex.com is where you will find your accounts. Usually, if you're not logged in, you will have a sign up sort of bar or button. You click on it, you enter your University of Portsmouth login, and that's where you will see. There are few things. It can be a little bit confusing because you have the classic view and you have the modern view. And when you enter, you are in the modern view, which is this view. And you can see that I have my personal room. And my personal room is like my office. It's a virtual office, really. So you can easily, at the start, give your student your office number, and they can sort of get into your room. Obviously, you can invite them into a certain time slot. If you want to schedule a meeting, you can go on this, and you can schedule at the top. You time your meeting name, and then what I like about setting a meeting on WebEx is that you can sort of have some sort of advanced option where if you're inviting a external speaker, then you can make them host, or if you have a big module where you have different sort of lecturer and you're the module coordinator, then you can set up all this meeting and let them be host, so there is no this issue around alternative hosting. I did mention about event, training, and meeting. So if you want, so that's for the meeting and scheduling a meeting. If you want to schedule a training session or event session, and I will tell you the difference between all of this in a minute, then you go on that, which will send you to the class view. And when you're on WebEx training, for instance, you can host a session. So you schedule a training session. And again, you put your topic, you set up your date, and you have all sort of options that can sort of tailor to your needs. And once you've done that, you can invite attendee, or and then yes, you set up your meeting. If you do it on Moodle, you can set up a training session and you can set up a meeting session. So you have the choice between the two. It's kind of a dropping bar. And it's what I like about Moodle is that students actually have everything into one place. So they go onto Moodle and they know exactly, they just have to click to get to the meeting rather than having emails, the details being on the forum. So it gets a bit confusing when they're invited externally, I think. So that's, oh yeah, that's something I wanted to show actually, something else, but I did mention about recording. Modern View probably will be best for that. So if you click on recording, then you will find all your recordings, basically. And you can either download and then upload it into Panocto, for instance, if you want to have this sort of reference, cross-referencing, which has been kind of a hot topic at the moment in Portsmouth. You can also edit your meeting, and you can remove some of the panels. So if you don't want students to see which students were at the meeting, or if you don't want people to see what was happening in the chat, because there is something a little bit controversial around in the chat in some of the conversations being. So you can do all sorts of things. It's very adaptable, and you can spend a lot of time trying to sort of faff with it. The only thing you probably don't want to do is to delete your recording, because then it's getting into the aspect of trying to retrieve it, which I haven't done so far. So I don't know what would be the problem around retrieving it. So I'm just going to stop sharing and going back to it. So that's pretty much what you can do on my WebEx. I call it my WebEx, but it's just the main site, the WebEx main site for the University of Portsmouth that's linked to the account.
We have a question from the audience, as it were. Peter wants to know if students join via the calendar, can they use any name when they log in? Because when they join from Moodle, it automatically takes that formal name through.
If they can actually, I'm not sure about the calendar, but if they use the just by invitation, they just type the number and the password, they can join with any name. So there is a potential to change the name, I think. I'm not sure with the Google Calendar because it's probably going to be linked with their email address.
Yeah, I tried to do it myself, and it did take, my icon had my initial in it, my student account. So I'd agree. I think it would bring in your name.
But I did, because I was trying to actually trying different things to actually demonstrate a few things. And I've set up, I've used my mobile phone and I've set up WebEx. But what I've tried to do is not to enter my email address. So you can sort of log out from WebEx and then enter a different email address and a different name. And I call myself Dexter the Cat on my phone. So if I log in with my phone, but I can't host, obviously, with my sort of privilege as a lecturer, obviously. But oh,
hello.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there is the potential to change. I'm not sure how easy it is to actually change things, especially if you have to join automatically from either Moodle or the calendar, because then you have to enter things manually.
Oh, I see. I've just reread Peter's question, and he's clarified that actually you can use any name when you join from the calendar. And Moodle, it uses your formal name. So yeah, that tallies up with using uop.webex.com as well.
Yeah.
I suppose that opens it up slightly to students leaving, I don't know, offensive names potentially. We've had that with other software sometimes, but I don't know if you've had any experience of that, your students doing that. I doubt it.
I mean, the thing, I can't really generalize because I'm dealing with postgraduate students who are slightly more mature. But I do deal with undergrads. I don't know what sort of flexibility they have within the Open University. And generally speaking, people do not misbehave. You have to be really, really unlucky to have any sort of rude sort of maybe username or even rude comment in the room. But I take Peter point, and I think it's a good advice to actually remind everybody. It's not something that I was thinking about, but I do like to set up my meeting on Moodle because I do like the student to sort of have some sort of structure about this meeting is, or this session is about this particular sort of learning. So I try to embed everything within Moodle. So I've never had to invite, except when I invite my sort of student, like project supervision student, and in that case, there is no issue around changing the name, I think.
Great stuff.
Okay. So I did mention to you about personal room, meetings, events, training, and WebEx training, WebEx events, and it gets really confusing, but they all pretty much do the same. You don't use those different sort of session or WebEx tool depending on the size and what you want to achieve. Usually personal room is used for individual meeting or personal tutoring sort of meeting. Meeting sessions are used for small group sort of teaching. And don't ask me to give you a number, I don't know. And again, you set up a meeting, especially if you don't use some of the feature that you will use in a WebEx training. And the additional with WebEx training is it's more for demonstration type of session. And you can also sort of divide your class into breakout room. So you can divide your class into small groups. So again, if you don't have a big class, I don't think it's worth going into training. I don't think the interface for training is actually very friendly. I prefer meetings, if I have to be honest. But I can see the benefit of using a training event or training session, I should say, because then again, it's confusing with event session. Training session for if you want to use the breakout room, and the additional thing as well is the use of emoticon, and I will show you that in a minute. Events is not something that you would potentially use in a classroom. It's more for sort of big sort of group size, conference type of session. So no real interactivity with students. So I can't really see the point of it. I've never set up an event because I've never had to do something like that. So I can't really talk about events in detail. I've used training and meeting, and as I said to you, the only difference, they have very similar feature, but the only difference is the additional breakout room and emoticon for the training session. I did put in pink the muting audio, because even though you can mute audio in the personal room and in the meeting, people can actually unmute themselves, or as in training and event, you can actually disable the audio for your participants. So in some respect, it could be good. You have the option, I didn't put it in there, but you have the option of expelling your student if there is some sort of misbehavior, but I've never used that again because I've never had that to that stage where I needed to expel someone, which I think has to be very extreme. Okay, so I'm going to show you now how WebEx Meeting works. Obviously, we are in WebEx Meeting, so it's easy for me to actually show you how it works. I will show you how. I will go back to that, Mark, with your question when we move into the training session, because I think it's a really good point. So these are the tools for WebEx. I'm just going to share my window, what I'm actually seeing. Oh, that's not what. I'm not sure you can actually see what I'm seeing. Can you see the WebEx meeting? Can someone just quickly put in the chat box?
Yes, we can. Yep.
Okay. So so this is the tools I want to show you. So that's really sort of basic introduction for people who have never used WebEx. If you have used WebEx, you might find this slightly boring. So that's my microphone, and if I want to mute it, I just have to click this, and it will become red. I am not going to do it, otherwise it's just going to break the flow of my sort of explanation. I could turn my video off, and that's the button, so I can click it there. This is my share button. So if I want to share something, and I will share something in what we call the sharing panel, which is in the middle of this. Oops, I've lost my. So these are the things I can share. I can share my screen, which is my second monitor, and that's where I'm trying to actually, I've got PowerPoint open, so I can see what are the things that I need to cover. And I can share my second screen, which is pretty much where my WebEx window is, but it's behind, it's showing you my internet browser. I could share some different sort of application, and that's the application that's actually open on my desktop. But I could also share some other application, and if I click share, I will get a list of all the application I have in my computer. So you can share, if you have an open SPSS, you can still share SPSS, for instance. I could share a file, and the file could be a PowerPoint, like I've done in this situation where I've uploaded my PowerPoint. And I prefer to upload my PowerPoint as a file, because then I can switch very easily between sharing screen and whiteboard. And that's where the whiteboard, so if you click on it, you will get a new whiteboard. And that's the sharing panel. And just to show you, because I did prepare before, if I can sort of switch between whiteboard. So I've created two whiteboards because I'm hoping we can sort of use the whiteboard in a minute. So that's my whiteboard, and that's one of the questions we will have a look at. And I'm going back and clicking back to my PowerPoint. This is the closed participant window. So if I close it, then I won't have this big participant panel, and I can put it back. And again, if I want to close the chat, this is what I can do.
Yeah. Saying we can't see, we could see sharing options to start with. So you were, when you first pressed share, we saw your other screens, but since then we haven't been able to see the last couple of minutes. I think it's since you've been in sharing mode.
Does it work better now?
Yeah, we can see the whole panel now.
Okay. Well, let me know if it's again. That's the thing I can't control. Then I have some more options. So that's all the things I was telling you: muting, recording, sharing content, closing the participant panel, closing the chat panel, and that's when I get to more options. So I wanted to talk about audio troubleshooting and audio connection. So if you have students with issue around audio, you can ask them to go and do this, have a look at their speaker, microphone, and camera sort of setting. They can test whether the speaker works. Sometimes they just mute it and they say, I can't hear you. And just, yeah, but if you sort of like unmute your speaker and just make your speaker not completely silent, that will work. So they could see all the things that work or not. If you still have an issue with student who's, everybody else can hear you, but you have one particular student who gets very frustrated because they can't hear you, I think the advice you can give to your participant is get out of the room and come back again. And it's a little bit like I've done with this sharing thing. I've sort of stopped sharing and start sharing again, and usually it works. It's you know, I mean, I'm not an IT expert, but usually that's what IT experts actually ask you to do, is to actually switch off and switch back on. So that's audio troubleshooting. Share panel, I've shown you. The attendee participant panel is here. If I want, I can send a private chat to Michael. So that's something I can do. I can, obviously, you as a participant, and me as obviously, I can't see really the point, as a speaker, but you can raise your hand. So if you're over your names, you could have a button and you can raise your hand. So I'm going just to click it, and you can see my hand, and then you can lower your hand. So you can ask your, thank you, Anne. You could tell your student that this is one thing they can do if they want to actually ask a question. If they don't want to use the chat, if they want to use the microphone, is to actually use the raise hand, and you will see them, and you will be able to actually interrupt the flow of your talk and let them actually speak. What else have we got?
Could we recap the whiteboard and sharing the PowerPoint presentation, please?
Yeah, sorry. So that's when you want to share something. So you have at the top, you can either share the screen, and that's useful when you want to demonstrate something, or if you want to go on internet and show something on internet, or you can share an application. And I know a lot of
Sorry, we're back to blank again. I think when you get to that sharing point,
I think you get confused by the whole thing. I'm sorry. So yes, if you ever go when you're by yourself in an empty room, you will see you have three different things. You have the sharing the screen, sharing application, and sharing a file, and the whiteboard is at the bottom, and you just need to click on it. Do I need to actually stop sharing again?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
That's something I didn't envision when I was sharing my. Hang on, I just need to. Okay. Sorry, what did I want to say? Sharing. Oh yes. So yes, you will see all those different things, and I wanted to show what, because I prepared the whiteboard. If you go at the top here, you can switch easily between your whiteboard and your PowerPoint session. This is, for instance, one of the whiteboard I've set up this morning. And hopefully, yeah.
So we're back to blank again. Apologies.
Okay, so I think it's when I'm trying to actually do things, it's going to.
That was like, just before you press stop sharing. Then we did see your panel. So there is a point where we can see you, but it's when you share past that. If you press OK to that message, does that bring it back up again? No. Oh yes, that's it. Yeah, we can see your panel now. Yes, that's ideal.
So that's the whiteboard, one of the whiteboard, and I can switch back with this little thing there, and I go back to my PowerPoint here, if you can see it.
You can, yeah, great stuff.
Yes, I could. Thank you. I could do some screenshots. I was trying to make it interactive. Obviously, it's a big failure. And that's a good point, actually. It's because usually when I try to demonstrate something, and you never know if it's going to work, I tend to have like a backup slide just in case. But I didn't do that. I was very lazy. So, but yes, good teaching point here. And thanks for reminding me. I wanted to show you the poll. And to go to the poll, I need to go to share the panel, manage the panel, and if you go to view at the top, you will get to manage the panel, and you can have all the available panel that's not in your viewer. So you can click on polling and just add this, and then you will have this. I hope you can see it.
We can, yes.
So you can add a new question. So I click on that, and then you can type your question. But if you want to do something a little bit complex, where it will take time to actually type, what you can do is you go onto a WebEx session, it could be your personal room, and then you set up your poll with your text, and then you save it. And so if I want, I could actually save this here. If I set up the whole question, and then it will I can type a name and it will save it somewhere in your computer. It doesn't really matter. But I can open a poll, and I don't want to save this poll. I have a few polls set up. So I'm going to open one, and you can see at the moment what's happening in my screen and what's happening in your screen, because I haven't opened the poll yet. And when I open the poll, you will be able to, it might actually not work with me sharing my screen, but if you want to have a go at it, yeah, thank you. And you can see, it might be very small, but at the bottom you have remaining time. And what is useful to do when you do a poll with students is to tell them how long left they have and give them maybe a minute or 30 seconds, maybe depending on the question, might be a minute or more, might be useful. And then you say, okay, you have only 20 seconds left, and then we're going to close the poll. And then you can sort of give them another warning by 10 seconds before, and say, okay, now I am going to close the poll. When you want to close the poll, you still have WebEx, which is kind of giving you a little bit of sort of brackets in terms of producing the answer. I can see already the answer, but at the moment you probably can't see the answer yourself. And you can pull the results, and apply, and then you should be able to see the results in your screen rather than mine. And that's pretty much how polling works. It's very useful for students. Don't you overuse it, probably, I will say, but it's very useful. I'm just going to shut this. And the last thing I wanted to show you is the record button, which I don't have because I'm not hosting, but you can see, I'm just going to stop sharing, actually.
I can make you host if that will
No,
help.
that's fine, that's fine. There is the picture here. I don't think I'm going to do any demonstration here because we're going to stop or pause the recording. So you can see this little red dot in the middle on the sort of the picture, and that's where you will find your record button here. And that's pretty much how WebEx works. And I don't know how you feel, but it's not that complicated and does require maybe a little bit of a, trying out things before your session if it's your first session, but it's not that complicated really. And as you can see with me trying to share my screen, like my meeting screen, that's obviously be prepared for the for the unexpected. Okay, I'm going to move on because I'm aware of time. WebEx training, and hang on a minute, I'm just going back to Mark's question, which obviously is something to do with, yes, I have it. What is the best way to give breakout room? I need to break out some of my 300 students into separate meetings. So you could do manually. What I've done is I've recorded, but I think we don't have time. I've recorded a small video and I was going to sort of illustrate the video talk, do a live talking of the video to show you how to do it. But what I can do is actually re-record myself talking and do like a 2-minute video of how to set a breakout room and maybe join it with this presentation so that guys at the tail can actually put it with that. The only sort of advice I will give to Mark and everybody else who deal with 300 plus students is that trying to avoid, already tell your students not to use their video. Obviously, they can't use the video in breakout room, but I think you need to, in terms of bandwidth and connection, you need to reduce that to a minimum because obviously it's going to take a lot of power to actually deal with 300 people. In terms of breakout room itself, I think, depending on the task you have to do, but I think you need to make it into a manageable sort of group. So I would say no more than 10. Somehow between 5, 6, 7 would be probably better than 10. But again, you will have an enormous amount of breakout room. It might be that when you have a breakout room, you have to sort of get help with other lecturers. You can't sort of manage 30 breakout room by yourself, or you need to be extremely clear with your instruction so that you don't have to go into each breakout room. And you can allocate either by name, which obviously you don't want to do with 300 students, or you can allocate randomly and say, I want so many breakout room of so many students in each breakout room, and you can do it this way. They will have they can share their screen and they can set up a whiteboard, so they can have a task within the breakout room to actually do something rather than sitting and standing like lemon. What you can do, Mark, is they can save their whiteboards, and when they go back to the main room, you could have maybe someone from the breakout room to actually sort of feedback of what they've done together, and then you can compare between all the different breakout rooms. That's how I will probably manage it. The other advantage of WebEx training is the use of emoticon, and that's something I'm going to use. I'm going to talk a lot in active participation. Is that because we don't have any sort of verbal, non-verbal, we don't see people really. Even if they use their video, you don't have this non-verbal sort of feedback. So you need to actually get something else to actually obtain this non-verbal feedback. And the emoticon tick and crosses, and you can see in that little sort of picture illustration. You've got green tick and red crosses. It's something that I use a lot when I do a training session, or if I teach my students at the Open University, because we have that in Adobe Connect, where you explain something, and so many times you're going to ask them to actually give you a tick, a green tick or a red cross, is just to show that they understood, and also to show that they're still following you and they're not doing something else, which in WebEx training you can also check. There is a little button somewhere. It's like an exclamation mark just above there, where you can actually check whether they're actually doing something else on their computer, and you can see how many people are actually following, but it doesn't give you any indication that they're actually following. They can be just on their phone, for instance. They have other emoticon as well, which is useful when people want to either upload, approve, when they sort of not clear about something, where they think it's boring, but obviously it sounds rude, but those emoticons are really useful to actually give you some indication either that you're going too slow, or there is something not quite right with it. Or if they're going away, you put like the coffee sort of emoticon to say, I'm actually going away, I have to attend to something. So you know that that particular student is not listening at the moment. And again, where you're going to find your student using it, if you actually teach them how to use it and say, it's actually there, please use it. It's really useful for me to get some form of information about what's happening in your head as I'm sort of delivering my stuff. Okay, we're going to move on Partation. And is there any question, Michael, that need to be answered, or?
I think we've answered most of them. We've had some questions from one from Mark saying, can we give students presenting rights so they can show their screens for things like programming code? So if you write the name and press change role to, you can switch them to presenter. I would really encourage you to keep host rights though, because that means you can get it back again afterwards. We've noticed in other sessions that we've run this week that if someone sometimes if someone joins first, they become the host.
Yeah.
And that stops you muting people or kind of controlling the session a little bit, which you need to sometimes. So presenter is the way to go with that one. I think most of them we've answered. We've got Emma Cripps with us today, who's very experienced in some of this stuff as well. So we've filtered most of those. So if anything pops up, I'll give you a shout. I think we're good.
So yes, the active participation is really, it's more my stuff, and I can talk a lot about active participation. I can give you a lot of examples of things happening and how I had to adapt. So I'm trying to sort of condense this into like another 10, 20 minutes. I'm not sure I will be able to show you some of the stuff and make you actually experience whiteboard like a student will experience, but here we go. These are some of the aims for synchronous online session, either to help students to understand key concepts, develop critical understanding, ensure that they're actually progressing as they should do. And among all of this, it's always about creating and maintaining a sense of community. So in terms of general advice, if I can give you from my experience of having done so many online sessions for undergrad and postgraduate, small session, bigger session. I do bigger session with the Open University when we have to deal with 300 plus students sometimes. So what I will advise you to do is that if you're running an online session with your students, you need to let them know very earlier on, either via the Moodle site or email, that actually the online session is happening, and how you intend to run the session and what you hope to cover, because they need to know in advance what they're going to be, what is the program really of the talk. And if you're dealing with a small group, it is a good idea to actually let them set the agenda. So it could be that, this is the topic. If there is anything particular you want me to cover, just let me know by this date, which make attendance actually more attractive. And I tend to do that a lot with both the university I'm working with. If you're dealing with bigger cohorts, it might be a little bit more difficult to actually do that. but it's always good to advertise the content in advance. And talking about face-to-face, obviously I'm talking a lot about my distance learning sort of experience, and in Portsmouth is solely distance learning, so they don't have any face-to-face lectures, whereas at the Open University we offer face-to-face lectures, so kind of the same model that University of Portsmouth is trying to sort of achieve this year, face-to-face session, and we have alternative online session. Usually when you have a 2-hour face-to-face session, it will sort of translate into an hour or an hour and a half online session. And do you cover the same thing? Yes, you do, but you will sort of change how you cover it. So it's going to be in a different sort of format, and you're going to include different type of activity that can deliver online using some of the tools that I've talked to you about. And usually the model is as follows. I mean, you probably have learned you shouldn't have a session that's more than 10 minutes, or you can't have a lecture more than 10 minutes. You can have, and that's my opinion, so, I mean, take it with a pinch of salt. You can have a session that's an hour or 2 hours, but the main thing is that you can't deliver knowledge for 2 hours non-stop. So it has to be this sort of blend of a small chunk of 10 minutes max of knowledge transfer or information delivery, and then you have another, you have a break with people doing things and students interacting and checking their understanding. So usually you start off by probing students to either tell you whether they don't understand what you've just explained, and then when you have the satisfaction that everybody's actually okay and they understood what you've been talking about, then you can have an activity that will allow them to actually apply this knowledge. Also, I would say if you want to offer effective online session, I've kind of sort of hinted at that, you need to teach your students how to use WebEx or any other video conferencing for that matter, and how it works. Because obviously you as a lecturer, you probably, if you've never used WebEx or if, as kind of a leading a session, you might feel anxious, but you need to understand that students themselves feel anxious. We have students who are not technology orientated and don't want to do that sort of thing. So if you add this anxiety to actually doing online session with the this unconfidence of using the software and being able to deal with what the session is offering, then it will have some anxiety and will lead to non-participation. So it's very important that if they feel confident, like if you feel confident in using WebEx, then you will do more things, you will be more adventurous, and same with your student. And the last thing is listening for silence, and that's probably the worst and the thing that you will have to deal on a regular basis. So you have to actually listen for silence. And silence doesn't mean non-participation. So you really need to put yourself into the sort of situation where you kind of tick boxes and look at all the different scenarios and what it can be when you have a silent session. So it could be that your students are confused because you've explained something, but you haven't checked that they actually understood. So if you set up an activity, then they're not going to sort of take part because they just don't understand what you're telling them. They could be confused by the question itself of the activity. So poor sort of explanation around the instruction. They could be, as I said, intimidated by the online environment. So that's another thing. Or they could be intimidated in using their microphone. So there is alternative to that. And also they could be distracted by something happening in their house. So they might be answering the door because they have the postman. So there are things that can explain why people are silent, and sometimes they think it's not the right thing to actually the right time to actually say something, or maybe they're just reflective and engaging passively, because that's a problem with a synchronous tool, is that it doesn't allow you the time to actually reflect on what you've just learned. It's kind of this kind of immediate sort of response to it. So really what you have to do, and that's my advice, is to allow this awkward silence, as awkward as it can feel for, in my position, is to actually understand that it doesn't mean that either boring and interesting or and decision doesn't want to engage. There might be something else going on. So usually what you do is you actually check and you kind of tick boxes and cross what it could be in order to actually move on.
Couple of good questions from the audience, if that's okay. Axel, do you let students know your expectations of them during the online session? For example, that they will be expected to contribute or to respond to polls?
Yes, but there is an expectation that it's never passive, an online session, and so that's why, but probably with students at the beginning, especially when they have been used to a face-to-face format, it's nice to actually tell them very early from the start it's not going to be like they do in face-to-face sort of session, where lecture are slightly passive, let's be honest. We're trying to engage with all sort of tools like Nearpod or anything, but there is this expectation that online teaching is a little bit more engaging, and students might actually like it by the end of it, actually, because they will find more in sort of in charge of their learning than passively being given stuff. But yeah, it's a good idea to actually explain at the beginning. You will have to be interactive. But I think I've seen someone saying about it takes time to chat. I think what's good is to give them the flexibility of how they can respond and how they can interact. So if you give them a wide range of tools, so usually, from my experience, because students don't like to talk, that's the bottom line. Unless you're in a very small group and you're dealing with very mature students, undergraduate students will not talk. They will not use their microphone for various reasons. Sometimes they don't even have a microphone, or they pretend they don't have a microphone. But what they like to be anonymous, and they like to chat, because that's how they actually deal with communication on a regular basis, where they actually chat to their mates. So what I tend to do is I set up an activity where I say, if you want to talk, fantastic, I will love that. If you're a bit worried about talking in front of everybody else, then you have this whiteboard activity. So please add, and I will tell them that it's actually anonymous, so they don't have to worry about whether their answer is actually inaccurate or something. So around the issue of confidence. But if the whiteboard, because the whiteboard will not work on people using browser rather than having installed the application. So for some people, the whiteboard is not going to work, and they won't be able to actually add anything. So in that case, you need to provide an alternative of using chat. There is an element of sort of waiting time, and sometimes you just have to kind of fill the gap when people are sort of talking and typing and chatting, and then go back to the chat and the question that was asked. Yeah, I think we all the same. I mean, even me as a person, I go into a meeting and I don't talk. I type, I chat, but it's just you never know when to interrupt, and sometimes there is some people who are very eager, and then they kind of raise their hand, and you just, oh, it's the right time. So I tend to chat because then people can see whenever they want to see it. So I think we all the same, really. I'm aware of time, actually, so I'm just going to move on. I had this fantastic scenario, but I'm just going to move on to what can deter students. And then again, I wanted to show you and share this whiteboard, but I don't really have the time to do it. In terms of silence, because someone said it's silence are deafening, I wanted to give you an example of a silent session that I had this week with my master student. So it was a drop-in session, and there was we have around 20 students in that course. There were 6 students turning up. So for a drop-in session, quite a good turnout number. And one student had question, because obviously a drop-in session is about to ask question, because they have to submit this form next week. And so she asked question, and I sort of answered. There was this sort of conversation going on, and they used their microphone as well. And then suddenly there was a silence, a big silence, 6 people in the room. And so I sort of reminded them. So that was how I kind of let the silence be for a few seconds. And then I say, okay, guys, just to remind you, I haven't prepared anything. I don't have any slide because this is a drop-in session. So it's just in case you're coming. I've kind of acknowledged that maybe they're just coming because they don't have any question and they're just lurking, and that's absolutely fine. But if you don't have any question, just please let me know, either using your microphone or in the chat box, because I didn't want to put them on the spot, that you are fine, so that we can move on. Obviously, if no one has any question, I think we will have to stop the meeting. So that's how I've kind of managed the silence. I probably could have done it differently, I don't know. And then one student said, well, actually, I don't have any question. I said, okay, that's fine. And then the other student, after a little bit of probing, I said, are you actually, I said, are you okay, so-and-so? And she used a microphone and she said, actually, I'm so behind that no, I don't have any question. But it allowed me, by sort of insisting a little bit without being too controlling and aggressive, by insisting a little bit, I've managed to find out that this particular student is actually so behind that she's probably a little bit worried about it and anxious. And she thinks she doesn't have any questions because she has so many questions. So it was a way of kind of reminding her that we can have a chat if she wanted afterwards. That I mean, the form is not something that they're going to be marked on. It's just to allocate them to a supervisor for next year. So I said, actually, as long as you can put a few IDs so we can allocate you to the right supervisor, you shouldn't worry too much about it. So trying to reassure her. So the silence. So I could have left it and said, okay, you don't have any question, guys. See you later. But because I've kind of insisted on it, and then this happened around 20 minutes into the session, and the session, I think, lasted until 1:45. So we had another 20 minutes of discussion following that sort of me going and insisting about the silencing. But it can be, it's really overwhelming, and really, as a person, you just think, oh, am I doing it right? So yes, it's okay. What can deter students? Again, I wanted to give you some useful feedback, and I wanted you to participate, but obviously I'm talking a lot, and we had lots of questions, interesting questions. So what I'm going to tell you instead is the things that I've identified. So please type in a chat box as I'm talking, so that we don't waste too much time. If you can think of any sort of points that will deter students from participating. And it's kind of recapping on some of the stuff we said. So I think technology sometimes can really deter students from participating, and it's very important in that respect that you offer them with a range of tools that they can use. It's not just about putting them on the stop and saying you have to talk, because then they will not participate. It could be a confidence issue. So then again, if you give them this sort of anonymity of whiteboards, they might actually feel a little bit more confident and inclined to actually participate. It could be that the lecturer is not friendly enough. So maybe reflecting on your own sort of lecturing, or not empathetic enough. And very quickly, I had a session during the lockdown. It was very early in the lockdown, probably the end of March, beginning of April, with my student at the Open University. And it was on a Thursday evening from 7 to 9. And that was at the time where we had this sort of NHS clapping. And so students interrupt in midway through the session saying, are we going to get a break? Because I want to clap for the NHS. I said, yeah, of course, we're going to have a break. I also want to clap for the NHS. So we had a break. And then when we came back, I could feel that I would not be able to actually go straight back into my teaching, because there was a lot of emotion at the back of, the coronavirus and the lockdown and everything. So I've kind of showed that, and maybe because myself, I was feeling like I didn't want to do that I didn't want to teach at that very moment. I wanted to actually sit down and probably just do nothing. And I think the students were in the same position. So very important to actually say, okay, let's take 5 minutes. And people were saying, oh, it was fantastic. People clapping, fireworks in my neighborhood. So there was this kind of exchange, community exchange. And I think at the end of it, when we kind of, and I had to find a transition as well, where I say, I'm very sorry. I really wish we can talk longer about this, but we really need to go back to business here. And I know there is not an easy transition to it, but that's my way of doing a transition. And students say, no, actually, that's why we're here. It's to actually do this session. So good on you. And so they were really, really positive about that. So it's really showing and adapt when there is something happening, and not just stick to your plan all the time. Lack of clear guidance, I've mentioned that, or expectation communicated by the lecturer, that's another thing. Group size, so in terms of group size, in psychology, we have this understanding of social laughing, which is that people actually make less of an effort when they're in a group. And what the evidence is actually suggesting is that as the group size increases, the responsibility is diffused, and we use this sort of collective effort model to actually suggest that people realize, because when people realize that their contribution cannot be evaluated individually, they're going to reduce in some form of reduction in motivation, and they will be less willing to participate. So that's why when you use break and group, you're trying to actually avoid that issue of social laughing, where people are passively waiting for someone else to actually do the job for them. teaching, when the teaching is abstract and repetitive, so things that they can find in books, what students actually like, especially online, is where students can share their experience, or when you can put students in a fictional situation, such as the use of a scenario, which I wanted to show you and then put you in the situation, but I wasn't able to do it. And when the teaching is not reactive enough as well. And what I usually do to make my teaching sort of very reactive, and again, it depends because it's my discipline as teaching psychology. But I remember I was teaching my students on active discourse.
Oh, sorry, that's my mic. Apologies.
On active discourse, and I found this very good article just before a session on the discourse of COVID-19, so the sort of language we use around COVID-19 and coronavirus, which was in the middle of the lockdown period. And we use that as really an illustration of content, and the students absolutely love it because it was really ringing a bell for them, and suddenly the concept became more relevant because they could actually apply it to their real lives. Okay, I'm moving on. Aware of time. We're kind of repeating myself here, but I wanted to show you something where you can increase active participation, which is kind of what the things we've said from the start. But I wanted to add, try to set up some fun activities. Obviously, you need to look for the audience and something that I've pinched from one of my colleagues at the Open University is when, for example, you want to explain some sort of skills like critical evaluation, try to use something that's silly as critically analyzing a sausage, where you can really define the point of the different things in critical evaluation and using prompt sort of things. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say here. As a way of conclusion, because I know you have to shoot off, Michael, it's pretty much you need to find some strategy to engage students, and it can be transferred on different interfaces. So it's not because you've seen this session on WebEx that you can't do it on Zoom. And your online session need to be adapted from your face-to-face session, but don't steer too much away from the face-to-face session if you do a blend of both, and you have students doing the face-to-face session and some will have to do online session. Try to make your online session interactive. Allow small group interaction as much as possible, but you also need to understand diversity and adaptivity by being reactive and offering them a wide range of tools so that they're not sort of restricted by one specific tool. And when something doesn't work, be quick to react and sort of bounce back into something else. Don't let take it overcome you, really. And a last word of advice, be prepared for the unexpected. It will never go as you plan it, like today. So that's my final word. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that session. That was really useful. I personally found that really useful. There's some really good settings that you covered that helped a lot, and those techniques were fantastic as well. It's a shame we couldn't have a little bit longer so we could get into some of the scenarios, because the slide looked really interesting for that. Fantastic. Great stuff. I'm going to have to shoot, I think, because our next session is starting. But thank you. Thanks again for such a good session.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.